Hello, USC football fans. Connor Morrissette and Chris Trevino in our matching red 247 sports polos. We're coming to you with an instant analysis after USC football media day. Chris, my head's spinning. We just heard from every coach and just about every player who is going to have an impact this season, so a ton to get to. Lincoln Riley started with an opening statement. He didn't take any questions. That will be Friday when the team opens up camp. He'll speak after that first practice. But he had a couple updates. He had some injury updates, which I can get to in a second, but also some facility updates. If you follow all the USC stuff on social media, I'm sure you saw some of that. But can you shed a little bit of light, Chris, on what Lincoln Riley had to say about USC's updated facilities this morning?
Right. Big, exciting day. Obviously, they have broken ground on building the new football performance center, and he announced today that they officially were given the keys to their new turf field that's out there on Howard Jones Field. So right now, USC has 3 fields, normally 2. They have that new turf field. He said they're getting the keys to it today. They're going to be able to use it in the coming days. But halfway through this month, at the end of fall camp, they're going to officially rip up Brian Kennedy Field. I believe that's the correct one. The one parallel to the parking garage on that side. They're going to rip that one up and start breaking ground on the official building Performance Center, as Lincoln Riley said, the best college football facility in the world, or something to that effect. But yeah, halfway through fall camp, or through fall camp, they're gonna get going on the actual building. They got the field in, so exciting day, for all those fans to say we need new facilities. Well, they're coming.
The other big piece of news, 4 guys will not be fully healthy entering fall camp, which again starts Friday. Kalolo Taaga, Makai Saina, 2 true freshman offensive linemen, Carson Tabarachi, the tight end who hurt his neck during the spring, and Chris, who was the last one, Jaden Walker, the true freshman linebacker for Michigan. He's not 100% either. But okay, let's get into what we learned today. So much to get to. I guess we can maybe begin with some overarching themes. Number one takeaway from today for you.
Number one takeaway, I would have to say, I'm doing a story about USC and the similarities this offseason into the 2022 offseason. If you think about it, Lincoln Riley's first year, they were coming off that 4-win season. No one really knew what to expect from this Lincoln Riley team. Were they going to be good? Were they going to be bad? Were they going to be okay? Who knows? This offseason kind of feels similar. They had a disappointing season the year before, now up to their standards. Going to the Big Ten, a lot of people aren't picking them to be in the top 3, be in the top 5, whatever. New quarterback situation, a lot of question marks. What is this team going to be? So I just was asking some of those guys who are on both teams, some of the older guys on that 2022 team, do they feel similarities? And one of the overarching answers was yes. We feel that, just coming together as a team. I think team cohesion and bonding is a big offseason theme, which you can talk a little bit about as well, because you heard a lot of those similar sound bites from players. But yeah, they do have an underdog mentality. The chip is large, as one player said, going into this year, and they're just trying to keep their head down and get the work done, because obviously last year wasn't good enough. The year before in 2022 wasn't good enough, and they actually ended up having a pretty good season in terms of wins. So I think USC's really embracing that underdog mentality they took a couple years back.
The team, the cohesiveness, like you talked about, cohesion, that's probably the better word. Is cohesiveness a word? I don't know. Either way, they're a lot more tight-knit than they were last season. And just from 30,000 feet, Chris, I think that has a lot to do with Lincoln Riley getting a couple of recruiting classes in here. A lot of those guys who are so close, they're a part of that 2023 class. And yes, USC's taken a good amount of transfers still, but it's not like it was that first year especially. And then last year, it just feels a little bit different to me too. Stacking classes the way USC has, of course, will lead to guys being closer, and I think that's a big part of it. But it was really interesting. I talked to Greedy Vance, the new defensive back who transferred from Florida State. He's only been here about a month, and he said, outside of the scheme, which is why he came to USC, Danton Lynn's scheme, and he feels like this situation will prepare him best for the next level, he really got a good sense of the camaraderie and the togetherness of the group. And when he did get here, he talked to a lot of the guys who were part of that Holiday Bowl game, and he said what was different about that game compared to the rest of the season. And the players explained about how USC had all those weeks of practice, and they only had about 55 scholarship guys, but everyone got really close, and they just had the one goal, which was to go win the game, and it was a really good situation. And he said that to him really made him feel happy and made him feel very confident in his decision, because these guys all really like each other. And a lot of players who had big roles in that game, I mean, Miller Moss, Elijah Page, who's going to be the left tackle, all the receivers, like those guys are all back and they're ready for a big role this year. And Greedy said he was really excited about that. But we've heard so much about the cohesion. I'm droning on and on. I can pass it over to you here. That's something that from every corner of the roster, from everyone we talked to today, I feel beaten over the head with it. The team, they're friendlier, that they do more bonding together. It just seems like a better situation. Will that lead to more wins and losses? I don't think it hurts. I don't know, about some of the question marks on the roster. We can get into that, but the team likes each other, and that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think a lot of them, not to say that they hated each other last year, but a lot of them, we're really close. We feel that bonding going on.
And the receiver room last year, there were problems. And Miller Moss talked about it a little bit. Those guys sort of butted heads. It's a totally different vibe this year.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And, even taking a group like the defensive line, I talked to Anthony Lucas. He says, we're all closer. And, Coach Henderson has been emphasizing that. They want us to be close. They want us to be, interlocked arms. They want us to be, brothers and play for each other out there. So do you feel that across the board? And, again, will that lead to more wins? I don't know. It still takes a lot of talent. It still takes a lot of discipline. But I like to think if you guys like each other, you're going to play that much harder for each other out there on that field.
And then one other note on that, Jay Fair, the new receiver from Auburn, I asked him about, he has 2 years of eligibility remaining, but how USC has sort of supplemented the sophomore depth, because those 4 sophomores are going to have a huge role, obviously, in the offense, with bringing in some older guys. Usually it's the opposite. The older guys will play a little more, and maybe 1 or 2 younger players breaks into that group, but it's going to be a little bit different this year with the sophomores, Mekhi Lemon, Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, Jacoby Lane. They, on paper, look like the starters, and then the rest of these guys maybe are potentially depth pieces. And he just said it's all very natural, and we're all very excited to compete, and they didn't, there's no ill will towards anyone, which it's one thing to say that now, and then we'll see what goes on from here. I just thought Jay Fair's perspective was really interesting. He had a really good interview. I'll get it on YouTube after this. He doesn't feel threatened by anyone. He's just excited to compete, and he understands, those sophomore guys, they work really hard, and they've earned their opportunity, which maybe last year there was some, with the transfers, okay, this guy did really well at his school, but has he earned a job here? I don't know about that. I don't think there's any of that heading into this season because of those sophomores. They returned, they didn't have the huge years a season ago, but a lot of them broke out in the Holiday Bowl. People are excited about that. The receiver room seems to be really close-knit, and every other room on the team does too. So, again, will it lead to more wins and losses? I don't know, but people are happy.
Overall, I mean, just talking with Jay Fair, and you talk with Greedy Vance as well, that was obviously a big theme going to this media day event, which is the new guys on the team. There were some new faces we got to see and meet. Those guys you guys mentioned. For me, I got to talk to Gavin Meyer, the big defensive lineman that they got out of Wyoming, the only transfer defensive lineman they got out of the spring window, which I know a lot of USC fans were disappointed in. But Gavin Meyer is, I think, going to play a key role on this team, whether that's as a starter or a high rotational guy. He's very excited to be at USC. He says, big difference from coming from Wyoming and to come to LA where everything is concrete. So he's getting adjusted to that, but he loves it out here. A little gamey on how actually big he is. I asked him, how much did you weigh coming in here? What do you weigh now? He's like, I don't want to get into specifics, but I did gain a couple pounds since he's been here. He is listed at 295 on the roster. I would say he looks about 290. He's a big guy, rocking the jeans, a cowboy coming from Wyoming. But I was very impressed with him. He said Eric Henderson was one of the big reasons why he came here. Was just so impressed with meeting him on his visit when he was out here. His process took a little bit longer than most guys, but he was excited to come to USC, and he's excited to be on the part of this team. And what is he bringing to this locker room and team? He said work ethic. I'm going to be the guy working. And Anthony Lucas even pointed that out when I asked him about Gavin. He said Gavin's always staying just to get a little bit more extra work, and so obviously quickly builds up your respect among your teammates, and they've all embraced him as well. So just a new guy to the fold, and he's going to be key because they need a nose tackle, and he might not be 320 pounds, but he has experience there. So you're hoping Denton Lynn can get a little creative in how they cover up kind of that hole they have there, and we'll see what it looks like in fall camp and then to the start of the season. But I think Gavin Meyer's going to have to play a big role for this defense in the middle.
With Jay Fair, I asked him why he came to USC. He said he has 2 years left of eligibility, and the development aspect of his college career really meant a lot to him, and he thought he could get developed at USC better than any of the other schools that were recruiting him. He also said the sustainability of the coaching staff. He doesn't feel like Lincoln Riley's going to go anywhere, and at Auburn there was sort of some up and down moments with the staffs there, which makes sense. In college football, there's always going to be some of that. So I thought that was interesting, too. And, of course, Lincoln Riley, when he's recruiting a kid, he's not going to say I'm going anywhere. But the fact that he came out and mentioned sustainability, that stood out to me. Like I said earlier, Greedy Vance talked about how Danton Lynn's scheme was what really locked him in with USC and how he felt like this situation gave him the best chance to reach his goals of making the NFL. I really think he's going to play a lot, Chris. I don't know about you. We can get into, I guess, a little bit of the depth chart question here, but to me, I think he's going to play a lot as a slot corner.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. They obviously went and got him for a reason. We probably going out of spring camp, we didn't think defensive back was really high on their list, and they went ahead and I believe he was the first transfer commitment they got out of the spring window, and we're like, okay, well, if D'Anton Lynn really likes him and they want him, that's already a super deep safety room. But I think versatility is something that D'Anton Lynn wants and needs for his scheme. So if you got Jalen Smith who can play all over, if you got Keely Arnold could play all over, you got Kamari Ramsey who could play all over, you got Greedy Vance, a guy who's very experienced, was on a championship team last year with Florida State, should have gotten a college football playoff. That's a different discussion. But Greedy Vance, I think, is going to play a lot. What exactly the role is going to look like, I'm not sure, but he's obviously a guy who can play nickel, he can play free safety, he can play strong safety, he can play a little cornerback. So I think if you can just pick up guys like that can do a lot of different things, it's going to make you a better football team. And as we know, injuries happen all the time, so it's nice to have a guy like that to bolster the depth of an already deep safety room. But again, that's a high value addition, and a guy who has championship experience and better experience overall just solidifies the safety room being the deepest, most talented room on this team.
We learned a few interesting things about the roster. So at right guard, that's the big bugaboo position for USC right now. Alani Noah, Amos Talele, but even Micah Benuelos, Josh Henson threw his name in there. Gino Quinones, if he's healthy, although he didn't give you a straight answer on if he was totally healthy to start fall camp. Henson mentioned those 4 names. I think it's going to be Alani Noah's to lose unless Gino is healthier than we think. So I look at him as a really important piece, but that was sort of the clarification we got, or the clarity we got in the at the right guard spot. I asked Jay Fair, is Miller Moss the guy, and he said yes. So not exactly breaking news here, but it's tough to get an answer from some of these coaches and players about who the quarterback's going to be, even though we know it's going to be Miller. I thought that answer was really interesting, and if you've just been following the team, you know it's going to be Miller. He's at Indianapolis at the media day, and he's the guy who is leading the team. He texted all the receivers when Jay Fair got here and said, we have a new guy here, let's go out and throw, and that's how Fair met everyone. So that was something that stood out to me. The middle of the defensive line seems to be wide open. Bear Alexander, and then who knows, is it Nate Clifton, is it Elijah Hughes, is it Gavin Meyer, is it Kobe Pepe, who we didn't talk to today? That competition, I think, is going to continue into fall camp, and no one really had a straight answer on that. Braylon Shelby, it sounds like he's going to lock down one of those edge rusher roles. Everyone's been impressed with him. Jacoby Lane, again, we hear so much about him having a breakout year. But I think the 3 biggest roster questions, the quarterback, even though it's not really a question, but when there's no starter name, that has to be on the list. Right guard, defensive line, that's what I learned. Anything else roster construction-wise or who's going to play-wise stand out to you, Chris?
Yeah, I think you make 2 really good points. That guard spot and that middle of that defense, what is it going to look like? The 2 big question marks. How the linebackers are going to line up. There's a lot of talent in there and a lot of experience in there. You got Eric Gentry, you got Easton Mascarenas, you got Mason Cobb, you got Rajon Davis, who seems tailor-made for a defense like this. Do a lot of things with him. So a lot of things going on. You still got the 2 freshmen in there, Desmond Stevens, Elijah Newby, a lot of talent in there. But how's it going to all come together? It's a good problem for Matt Entz to have. So I'm excited to see how they actually work out those linebacker rotation. Is there a rotation? Is it just going to be 2 guys? Is it going to be 2 guys rotating with 3? So I think that's the secondary question, because I think they're fine in terms of experience. What's it going to look like come the opener? I think that's a question we have to look at. But yeah, the 2 holes on the defense and the offense at the O-line and D-line position are the 2 big ones. I think what the starting lineup for the wide receivers is going to be interesting, but you mentioned it seems like those sophomores are going to be the case. But yeah, not a ton of questions because we have some answers, but definitely against those fronts, you got to get some holes filled.
The last thing for me, D'Anton Lynn, I asked a lot of the defensive players about him. Mason Cobb called him a genius, and he just said the way he's able to explain everything to us is so different. And he said spring practice with D'Anton Lynn, with this new defensive staff, I'm having fun playing linebacker again. We did hear some people talk about the last staff without really meaning to talk about the last staff. That stood out to me. Jamil Muhammad had some things to say about the differences between the last staff and this one, which we'll have on our website, uscfootball.com. Some of these returners were very frustrated with how last season played out. Can you blame them? And we'll see what happens when the pads come on, but the vibe around the defense, just the vibes in general, are much higher. I think that kind of happens at the beginning of every season. So there are the question marks on the roster like we talked about, but Chris, to be totally honest with you, I think the linebackers are going to be pretty good, and I think the secondary is going to be really good for USC.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. At least you feel confident in the secondary with Danton Lynn, a guy who's worked at the NFL working with safeties, and Doug Belk, who's coached under Nick Saban, that they're going to have that secondary right, which was a big issue last year. And even if the linebackers are like 50% better, that's a huge improvement from what they were last year. And we think highly of Coach Entz and his football IQ and what he brings to this defense as a X's and O's guy, and a guy who's a former head coach and national championship winning head coach. You have to think he's going to have a lot. His fingerprints are going to be all over that position group that needs a huge bounce back. So yeah, I feel confident about the secondary. I feel better about the linebackers. We just don't know what that front. Even when you got Coach Eric Henderson there, do they have the talent to consistently be a force in the Big Ten in this brutal schedule?
And with Easton Mascarenas-Arnold, is he a first-round NFL draft pick after this season? No. He's a little undersized, but all first-team Pac-12 last season, and a guy who, by all accounts, everyone loves. He works really hard. He does everything right. He's a really smart player. So are there going to be times where he goes in the hole against a running back and, maybe comes in second? Sure, but that's football, and I do feel a lot better about this linebacking core. I did feel pretty good about it last year, and that kind of blew up in my face. But I think you have to, between the staff changes, Easton coming in, Cobb returning, Eric Gentry, those are three pretty good backers. So feeling better there, but you're right. It's all about the front. Offensive line, the depth is limited. I like what they're doing there, but you have to have questions about that as well. Media days, Chris, they're great, but I'm always so excited for the game because I'm just ready to have some concrete takeaways. And they got to go through camp first, and we'll report on all of that. We can't watch as much as we'd like, although Saturday is open, so that'll be fun to partake, to watch. But I'm ready for the LSU game after today. I'm ready to go.
We still got a month to go. Patience. Feels like we just got into the roller coaster, and now we're loaded up. We got the straps on. Now we have to do the slow descent of fall camp in the last 2 weeks of August. And then when we get to the top, then we're at LSU. I did want to mention, because we mentioned about the injuries, and you mentioned couldn't get a straight answer. Should we take Lincoln Riley's word that those four are the only ones going to be out? I would not, because a lot of people were gamey about their status. Gino Quinones would not give a straight answer if he was fully cleared. John Humphrey would not get a clear answer if he was fully cleared. So will those guys be sitting? We still not really clear on Lake McCree, even though it sounded like he would not be ready for the start of fall camp, but he was left off the list. So again, can't get a clear answer there. So I would be hesitant to think that only those four guys are going to be out. So just want to throw that out there. We'll see on the first day of fall camp what's actually going on.
I agree. Any final thoughts? Are you good with that? Your final thought?
That might have been my final thought. My final thought is we did not plan this. Shout out to the tour guide. He's being quiet for us so we can finish this up. But we did not plan this. Don't say twins in the comments. I don't want to hear it. They already can't tell who's taller than us. Now they're going to be able to tell us apart.
He's Chris Trevino. I'm Connor Morrissette. This has been Instant Analysis after USC Football Media Day. Another great event. Shout out to USC Athletics. Really helpful for what we're trying to do. Fall camp starts Friday. We'll see everybody then for more Instant Analysis. Then it's football season, Chris. Let's go. Thanks for watching.